Hello, welcome to this week's edition of Conversation with History. I am Thecla Wilkie, and this episode promises to be very interesting, exciting, and probably explosive, depending on the mood of my guest. So it's so good to be in your home. Thank you for welcoming us here. That was a firm grip. Did you learn it from the CBN, or where did you learn that from?
It comes natural.
Naturally. Recent times, you have been, all over the place, but we want to roll back, and as is the tradition of the program, we start from the past
to the present,
merge it with the present, and then project into the future.
Wow.
Yes, that's the beauty of the program.
That suits my mind very well, the way my mind works. Yes.
So, for starters, of course, we know by virtue of the time you were, all over the place. When I mean all over the place, I don't mean it in a negative way.
Sure.
I mean it in a way of, I am here to serve. Pick me, and you won't regret it. So
that's
yes.
Sounds like another lifetime ago. Yeah, it's in the past.
It's in the past.
I've moved on to other things.
We'll come back to that, but let's start from the very start. Everybody know you as one. Okay, for some people, he was once a presidential candidate. For others, he was a deputy CBN governor. At some point, he's an economist. At one point, he's a journalist. So there's just a potpourri of, activity that's, characterized you as a person. Yeah. I want to dissect and, be able to understand, the person behind the mask,
That's interesting.
Yes, the man behind the mask. We want to dissect that. Yeah. So from the very start, let's know a bit about your background, how you grew up, where you grew up, and all of that. I mean, hearing it from the hustle, we read a lot about you, but we want to hear it from you. Yeah. Coming from you.
Thank you. Well, I was born in 1963 on the 7th of May at the Island Maternity, I think what is now the General Hospital in Lagos, on Lagos Island. My father, the late Isaac Kingsley Moghalu, was then a Foreign Service officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lagos. My mother, Lady Vida Moghalu, still alive, and she was then a teacher at the Breadfruit School, again on the island. We lived on Webb Road in Ikoyi, in a flat for government civil servants at that time. And so shortly after I was born, my father was posted to Geneva in Switzerland. And so I was 3 months old when I joined him in Geneva with my mother, and we spent the next year in Switzerland while he was doing his training and various things, studying French. And then after that, he was posted to Washington, D.C. So again, we moved, and so I spent the next 3 years of my life, early childhood, growing up in Washington, D.C., starting nursery school and so on. But then there was a crisis back here at home in Nigeria. It started in 1966. And that put a cloud over the careers of many people in the Foreign Service at the time, in the Federal Civil Service, who come from my part of the country. I come from Anambra State, Nnewi to be precise, and so I'm Igbo in terms of ethnic origin, but in my mind I'm Nigerian complete. And of course I recognize ethnic identity as simply sociological facts. But at that time, my father decided to return to the Eastern region, like so many Foreign Service officers who were Igbo at the time. He had been posted to go to the Nigerian High Commission in Canada in late 1966. And interestingly, the ambassador at the time in that mission was Aminu Sanusi, the father of who.
SLS.
Yes, SLS. So I often joke and say this association actually has crossed several generations, but without knowing, until
destiny,
until we met each other.
Faith.
Yes. So, but he didn't take up that posting because he was now going back to the Eastern region. So in 1967, my father returned to the Eastern region with all of us, joined the cabinet office, the office of the governor and so on. And eventually when the crisis broke down irretrievably and a civil war began, and Colonel Ojukwu announced the secession of Biafra after Aburi, the Aburi talks broke down because the Biafrans were of the position, the eastern region at the time were of the position that the Aburi Accord was not honored. And so they then said, on Aburi we stand, and then they announced secession. So when they did that, then they created a Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Biafra. My father joined that. After the Civil War, he continued in the civil service in the cabinet office in East Central State. And one of my fond memories was that I was in primary school then. Of course, when we came back, 1967, I now learned how to speak Igbo. Because of course, my grandmother could not speak English. So I had no choice but to, to learn how to communicate with her. That's not Washington. So I went from Washington to Enugu and then to the village. So I grew up as a child in a very rural setting in a civil war. We used to go to the stream to fetch water. My father had a nice bungalow he had built in our hometown, but there was no running water. So there were pit latrines. But we had a house that had normal toilets. But because of the war situation, and there was no,
Was it humbler?
Yes, there was, So, we used to go to Nenkisi, as we used to call it, a stream close by to fetch water. And the Civil War was a pleasant memory for us as children, occasionally, marked with sadness because my uncle died in the war. He was a Biafran soldier, my father's youngest brother, and I remember his funeral, the wailing and the gnashing of teeth. And I said to myself, even as a child, war is bad. We used to, fry grasshoppers and crickets and eat. This was how I grew up, the masquerades and all of that. So it was happy, but also sad. We would listen to the older people talking about the war, the advances of the soldiers, and then everybody would just go on. You'll be hearing go on, go on. You'll be hearing that name a lot. Then of course, Ojukwu, we were young people. We didn't fully grasp what was going on. But after the war, one of the interesting memories I had was Gowon's visit to the East Central State, Yakubu Gowon, as head of state of a reunited Nigeria now. And as his motorcade was moving, because my father was in the security division of the cabinet office, sort of the intelligence area. So my father was in the motorcade. And so we were standing on the street waving to Gowon, I salute you, General Gowon. Brave commander, you are welcome. All of that.
You still remember the song?
I remember the song. And so we were waving, and I saw my dad, that's daddy in the motorcade. I was so excited. And then Gowon passed and all that. Why is this story important? Because many years later, in 2005 to be precise, we inaugurated the Isaac Moghalu Foundation in memory of my father. It was 7 years after his passing. And this was happening in my hometown in Nnewi. And who was the chairman of the occasion? General Dr. Yakubu Gowon, retired. So, very interesting. He, the first time he had come back, it's historic, and there are many connections between us in different parts of the country. That war was a misunderstanding, but you see, we must get behind it. And I am not sure we fully have. I'm not sure we fully have. And until and unless we do, it will be very difficult to mold that national character that we need in Nigeria to make progress. So, but back to my development. So I went to primary school in Enugu, WTC primary school. And then I got into secondary school. I entered the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, but in Enugu campus to study law. So I graduated, I became a lawyer in 1986, went to law school, was called to the bar, but I always knew that I never wanted to practice law, funny enough.
So who encouraged you to go into law?
Actually, there were two reasons I went into law. One was that I had a strong passion for international law. And I always wanted to be a diplomat. I always wanted to either be a Nigerian diplomat or an official of the United Nations, any of the international organizations.
Following the suit of your dad?
Yes. I studied law also because of the encouragement of my parents. Because in those days, our parents would always want their children mainly to study what we call professional courses. Law, medicine, accountancy, engineering, those kinds of things. So I had wanted to study mass communication. That was actually, so my interest in the media began very early. I liked mass communication because I realized I liked to write a lot. So I told my dad, I said, I'm thinking about mass communication. He said, mass Guinea. My friend, you're going to apply to read law. Okay, so I read law, but I knew that I wasn't interested in going to court and practicing and all that. But I found out since that it was a good thing that I studied law. It's a very good degree to have. It makes you very versatile. You can fit in pretty much anywhere. You know, and be useful to the organization, you know. So that's what happened. So I studied law. And after that, I did my youth service as a legal officer at Shell Petroleum at the headquarters in Lagos then. So it was a padded youth corps existence. There was that.
Away from the reality of life.
In many ways, you know. Yeah, there was
cocooned.
Yes, we were cocooned, you know. So anyway, yeah, it was a good 1 year. And then from there, I wanted to go abroad immediately. It was always clear to me that I was not going to make my career in Nigeria in the initial years. My mind was firmly set on that.
Was there a reason why your mind was tilting towards going outside the country?
Well, first of all, my interests had always been international. Even as a child, when I would get the newspaper, I would go first of all to the world section and read foreign news.
Was that influenced by your dad's
to some extent,
job?
Yes. I had my natural interest, but of course my dad's life was an influence. And so I had dreams of continuing somewhere in his footsteps when I was young, and also kind of finishing his unfinished business. I had a very strong sense of legacy because I'm the first child. And my parents really inculcated in me the level of responsibility that I have in the family and for the family, you see? And so that sense of legacy was very strong. And I wanted to continue that legacy because for him, he always regretted that the Civil War interrupted his diplomatic career. Yes. And, you know, he gave me a piece of advice that I can reveal. It could sound controversial, but this is an honest conversation that we are having. He told me when I wanted to join the Foreign Service not to do that. He said, don't join the Foreign Service. This was in the 80s. He said, you know, the war, the shadow of the Civil War still is there.
Lingers.
And, you know, you will find that your ethnicity will matter more than your talent. That was him saying. He said, if you do very well and you rise, after about 12, 15 years, what's going to happen is that Nigeria will look for you. And you will come in on your own terms or on more comfortable terms. And then you would have sort of bypassed some of the local politics. Yes, he said. He turned out to be prescient because from Shell, I went to Newswatch, became general counsel of Newswatch, such as a media lawyer and a journalist at the same time. While I was lawyering for Shell, I became a special correspondent for several international newspapers and magazines. It was always clear to me that that was something I would do for a few years.
A transitional
situation, because I wanted to study further. I wanted a master's degree and I wanted a PhD. So because it was always clear to me as a young person that my future lay outside Nigeria.
You sound like a prophet.
Yeah, well, you know, some things yeah, I always knew. Anyway, after 3 years in Newswatch, lawyering and writing as a journalist and so on, I left. I was admitted to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Now, the Fletcher School is one of the world's leading, most prestigious, one of the top 10 graduate schools of international affairs. And it's one of those kinds of schools that when you go to, you get into the networks of the world, you see. Today, I have friends everywhere in the world, including in some places I won't mention.
We understand.
But we are buddies, you know,
Yes.
so, you know, because we were classmates before all of that. And so that's, you know, it makes my reach rather far and wide around the world. And going to the Fletcher School is the first thing that gave me that network, really, globally, you know. So other than my journalistic activities internationally. So went to the Fletcher School, studied international law, diplomacy, political economy, and from there, I joined the United Nations in 1992. That's really how my journey began. The Fletcher School positioned me for the world stage. Great time there, 1 year, and then I joined the United Nations. The rest is history, as they say. I served in the UN from entry level, first in Cambodia, then in New York at the headquarters, then in Croatia, then in Tanzania and Rwanda, and then in Switzerland. And I rose from entry level to the highest career rank of director. So that's how my career went for 17 years. Yeah.
For you to have spent 17 years, that's no walk in the park.
No, it's not.
It's no walk in the park.
Yeah.
So, and like you rightly put it, well, it has like opened your eyes to a lot of things that, you know, some of us don't even know. And now that you're here, we would like to ask you a few questions in that regard. If you want to analyze or, you know, look at Nigeria's diplomatic journey, how would you assess it? Because again, like they say, no man is an island, the world is a global village, and somehow we intertwined. We have to relate and communicate and engage the world. So from your 17 years of being in the UN, would you say Nigeria has done fairly in that regard?
Nigeria in the past, Nigeria did very well in the area of international diplomacy. It's Africa's largest economy. It's the largest country of the black race. And so it has some natural endowments that enabled it to project itself very effectively in the 60s and in the 70s, and to some extent in the 80s. So Nigeria has done very well. Don't forget that we were named a frontline state together with the Southern African states during the fight for apartheid because of our very strong support for Zambia, Tanzania,
Liberia,
those countries around Southern Africa. And then our projection in Liberia and Sierra Leone in the 90s. You know, so Nigeria has been a regional superpower. But unfortunately, that has not been consistently maintained. You know, and in more recent years, Nigeria's diplomacy, personally, has not impressed me very much.
How would you react to the speculation that, you know, there's sometimes deliberate conspiracy theory that indicates that there's a deliberate attempt or calculated motive to keep Nigeria where it is so that there'll be a bit of more control over it, because it's serving as a threat to not just the African region, but to some of our friends out there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, you know, international affairs, many people don't understand international affairs. I'm a realist when it comes to international affairs. I'm not into, you know, morality is fine, but as an as an expert in international relations, I lean towards the realist interpretation. And that is that nation states in the world are trying to get ahead. And they place their own national interest first, before the interest of anybody else. But diplomacy is sometimes about the art of telling you that your interest is maybe even more important than mine, so that we can unite. But behind, I'm actually trying to serve my own interest. You see, this is what happens. And so I don't go into conspiracy theories, but it is Nigeria's business to make sure that nobody keeps it down. And I don't think anybody is keeping Nigeria down more than Nigeria and its leaders are keeping Nigeria down. Because yes, it's in the interest of some people for Nigeria to remain fragile.
The way it is.
But it's not an excuse.
A divided house.
Yes, but it's not an excuse. We must hold ourselves responsible, not somebody else No, that person is, if that is the case, that person is succeeding because you let him succeed. That we need a leadership that thinks beyond the tribe, thinks beyond the religion, and thinks about all of us as Nigerians as a whole, as God's children, deserving of a place under the sun, and that we have one destiny, because even though it may not have been our choosing, the British put us together as one country. We have to make it work.
So what are you really suggesting?
What I'm suggesting is that Nigeria can work. Nigeria is not condemned to failure, but for it to work, we must return to a proper federal system. And we're not there. That's what I'm suggesting. And that we should go deep to have that discussion about the Constitution, so that it is owned by all the ethnic nationalities of Nigeria, because they see the Constitution as protecting their interests, and they know where they belong in this contraption. But the Constitution of 1999 was made by the military.
Okay, I also wanted to ask you this question. You know, when you were talking, you mentioned how your dad, you know,
Yes.
knowing
Yes.
your environment and
Yes.
the reality, you know, befalling you, advised that you go into foreign
International
organizations because of. So
Yeah.
it begs the question: if you have always had a chip on your shoulder.
Is that me as a person?
Yes.
Oh no, never. Funny enough, never. When my dad was talking, I was very young. Now, I cannot have a chip on my shoulder, because if I tell you my life story, you will find that it shatters all those ethnic stereotyping.
Excellence.
I told you how Balaji Akinyemi helped me to get a scholarship that went to Fletcher. He's not an Igbo man. He's not my cousin. You see what I'm saying? And after all those years in the UN, and I left and set up my consulting firm in Geneva, Switzerland. I did it for about a year. I ran into Lamido Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, as he then was. And he seemed a bit impressed with what he saw and said, my friend, come, we're going back. Let's go and work together. Hey, he's Fulani from Kano. So for me, as a person, in fact, the opposite has been the case. But it does not negate the experience, the general historical experience that the country has had. Do you understand what I'm saying? But as a person, God forbid, chip on the shoulder, for who? But I can't help the way some other people feel because of facts that have happened in Nigeria's history. And some of them may be resentful because of those facts, and they may feel they are not being treated equally. So I'm saying this, that two truths can coexist. That's all. But as for me, no chip on my shoulder at all.
Okay, so let's move on to your time at the central bank.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes. I mean, that was another phase of your life that, you know, brought you to us,
Yes.
you know, as a people, you know. And one would ask,
Yeah.
what has also happened in the past is that there are textbook analysts
Yes.
who would prefer the solutions, but
Absolutely.
give them the work tools to go there, they'll
Yeah.
flop,
That's true.
you know. But in
That's
your own case, you've worked with a CBN,
Yeah.
and we've had several monetary policies that seem to slap us very hard on the face. So the question is, you've been there,
Yeah.
you've been worked with the CBN, you've been inside and you're outside now.
Yeah.
Won't you say you're also complicit in where we have gotten ourselves to today as a people?
That's
Because
it.
I mean, yes.
I can assume you're being deliberately provocative. Here is why. Our tenure in the CBN that I was part of, from 2009 to 2014, was one of the most successful, if not the most successful, in the history of the central bank and in the history of this country. Why? In 2009, the world was prostrate from the global financial crisis. Nigeria itself had also some type of banking crisis because some banks were on the verge of collapse. It was our team, led by Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, with me coming in as Deputy Governor for Financial Stability. I was recommended to President Yar'Adua, who appointed me, precisely on the basis that I had knowledge and experience of risk management, which was necessary to help to manage the Nigerian financial crisis and the system. We stabilized the Nigerian banks. No bank failed, no depositor lost a kobo. We brought inflation down from 14% to 8% before we left. We ran a world-class central bank. That's why I said you were being deliberately provocative. Because in my time, it was success, success, success all the way. On inflation, we were successful. On stabilizing the financial system, we were successful. On the payment system, we were successful. I led the team that introduced the bank verification number, the BVN. So let me finish, because this is very important. We introduced all this digitalization of the payment system that has created a huge economic opportunity for Nigerians through fintech. So on those three major areas, we were hugely successful. Why you are making this provocative comment is because you are not in your mind cutting off historically. You're just seeing the bank in the last 10 years.
Also understand my position here.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I am not speaking as Thecla here.
I know.
I'm speaking on behalf of people. I'm asking questions on behalf of people.
We fired some bank CEOs. Some went to jail. Do you understand? We did the job. We came, we saw, we conquered. No question about it.
So you can beat your chest.
I can beat my chest. So, but what happened was that after our time, from late 2014, the central bank became, starting from the appointment of a particular individual as governor, the central bank went downhill. Became a political institution, became a messenger for politicians. They say jump. Gentleman says, how high do you want me to jump? You cannot be a storekeeper and marauders want your store and you hand the key to them willingly. At least they should shoot you before they take your store, if you're a normal person. But if you're saying, oh, you want the key? Come and take. And then, okay, but whatever you get, maybe we can share. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying, you know. So this is what happened.
Okay, so what would you say worked for you that isn't working for the man in charge now?
Let me tell you, the speed of the leader is the speed of the gang. Sanusi, as the governor, was a leader with a very clear vision about where he wanted to take the bank. In recruiting me, because I was the only vacancy that he brought in, because there was a vacancy, he could have chosen a different kind of person. But he went for me because he was also persuaded by my international pedigree and my track record as in terms of my ability to deliver results. And also maybe what he considered a proneness towards integrity and ethics. Do you understand? I didn't grow up in the banking system. So nobody will come and tell. In fact, he told me, he said, I want a deputy governor in charge of these reforms who is not from the banking system, so that you're detached.
You're not compromised.
Yeah, you're not compromised. Not that when you see a bank MD and you tell him, sit down there, the man will sit down there and salute you and be waiting for the next instruction, which was how I handled the banks, quite frankly. I wasn't, me and you didn't work in Oceanic. Me and you didn't work in Standard Chartered. I don't care. You're coming to me, you're coming to the Deputy Governor for Financial Stability. You're coming to your regulator. You're not coming to, oh boy, why did they do me like this now? Is it because you're now in CBN? Remember when we used to be at, let's shall I the thing now? Let's find a way. Do you understand? Those kind of conversations could not happen with me.
From what you have said now, are you saying you ticked all the boxes?
Look, I cannot, I'm not perfect.
You did 90,
oh, no,
99.9%.
No, I wouldn't say 99%. But, we can't score ourselves. Otherwise, really, we would lack humility. Let others be the judge. But let others judge who were informed. And all the informed judgment was that the central bank of our time performed very well. If I were to award a mark, I would say 85%, which is a clear A.
It was during your time too that the 50 naira note was introduced.
Yes.
And over time it became a subject of conversations. Okay. And it had to do with why did you even have to change it in the first place? Because it would seem the one that we had before was even better in terms of quality and all of that. So how would you react to that?
Look, there will always be issues with the matter of, or there have been issues, with the matter of the quality of banknotes, and different, arrangements have been made over time. I think it's a matter of who is there, the kind of contract that was awarded, the ability of the people who got the contract to do the job. It's just a quality and standard control issue. That's all I would say.
So how were you able to manage the naira to the dollar value?
Well, in our time in the central bank, Nigeria was making a lot of money from oil sales. Oil price was high, sometimes got to almost $100 a barrel. That's one. We had healthy reserves of about $37 billion at the time. And we managed inflation. You see, people don't understand the link between inflation and exchange rate. There is a link. A high inflation environment always devalues the currency. It will affect it. So, because investors don't like high inflation, and the more inflation, the more they hold back. The more they hold back, the less the dollar supply into the, and then the value of the dollar will continue to go up. And so it's an interesting dynamics. So there's some correlation between monetary policy and foreign exchange policy. Now, many people argued, oh, the classic definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. That's not what we have. What we have is cost push. That's called demand pull inflation. What we have is cost push because the cost of inputs is increasingly expensive. The cost of electricity, infrastructure, everything is sort of embedded into the price of goods. So that's what is causing our particular type of inflation now. So why does the central bank raise monetary policy by the monetary policy rate by 400 basis points? It's too much. And I smile. I said they did the right thing. Why? Because it's a double strike at the money supply to tighten it up so that there's less naira chasing the dollar. And so it's not just about inflation, but it's also about the foreign exchange rate. The less naira that is available to chase the dollar means we're more likely to achieve some sort of stability in the forex market. I am hopeful that the measures that are being taken over the next 2 years, hopefully, will help to stabilize the situation. It's not going to be a shotgun. I said it in the lecture. This crisis is not going to go away tomorrow morning because it's a crisis. What we see as the crisis is not the crisis. What we see as the crisis is the symptom of the real crisis. What is the real crisis? Nigeria is not a productive economy.
Could you also say,
yes,
just leaning to what you just said now, could you also say perhaps maybe why you made a lot of success at that time was because the environment was also enabling? Because, you're talking about the oil prices that were high.
Yes.
So many other factors that worked in your favor.
The environment was better, yes. But we could have still blown it. Let me explain why. We always had the same kind of politicians. The politicians in the era of Buhari, I'm sorry, they were no different from the politicians in the era of Jonathan. We protected our independence, and we didn't allow politicians to interfere in our decisions. That is actually the most important reason for our success.
Yeah. And it brings me to this next question.
Yes.
This is not another provocative question.
Feel
it's
free
just
to,
me
yeah,
asking.
That's all right.
Now, given our reality, as it is, as it's playing out now, do you think if they had made you this central bank governor, do you think you would have made a difference given the reality of what we have on ground?
Thecla, you're a dangerous woman. Let me say that, first of all, that's a speculative question. But I can just tell you that every job I have had in my life, I have delivered at least 90% of success. Trace my career from beginning till whether as a professor at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, whether I strive for excellence. That is me.
Having listened to you talk, it just brings back memories of one of the past presidents, that I also interviewed. And one of his response to some of these Nigerian problems was that he didn't know that Nigeria was this complex. he didn't know that it was this bad. Would you also say that, can we safely assume that, you know, it's easier said than done?
Sure.
Because in this instance now, the man there, the man wearing that heavy cap,
Sure. Yeah.
may be carrying more weight than you and I even know.
Of course. Of course.
So perhaps,
I don't envy them.
perhaps, especially with the kind of country that we are in, you know, where if you make one small mistake.
Just look at a proper decision of moving some of the departments to Lagos. Just look at the backlash. Look at that's what tells you that this country is not serious. People are wasting their time and their saliva on a normal administrative decision made for good reasons. And they've tried to politicize it and done. You would have thought the federal capital has all of a sudden been moved to Lagos because the CBN moved some departments to Lagos. That's why I came out and said, I don't see what is this is just a storm in a teacup. And Sanusi also had the same view. It will not surprise you that Sanusi and I often have the same views.
Now, to the next question.
Yes.
And that will be very pointed. Would you describe yourself as a politician in any way at all?
No. Very simple answer, no. Let me explain what a politician is in the context we know it.
Interchangeably, those words are used, and you can't do without one. You can't be a leader without playing a bit of politics.
Well, listen.
Even in the banking sector, there was a bit of politics that would have played out without
explain.
you being conscious of it or necessarily being direct about it.
Yes, you may have a point. I don't say that politics is a dirty word. I'm not saying that. But you asked me who I am. And I've told you who I am. I'm a leader first, before anything else. Now, it's not that I don't understand the dynamics of politics, but I'm understanding you to mean politics the way we play it in Nigeria. There's a difference between that and the kind of politics that I understand and will make use of, which is human relations, stakeholder management. How do you manage conflicting interests?
And it begs the question of why, I mean, you not being a politician will go into the deep, murky waters of politics of Nigeria
for a while
and say, I want to be a politician. I want to lead this country.
Yes.
What were you thinking?
Maybe I had a fit of insanity. It's possible. Some people thought so. Knowing me, I say, Chiedu wants to go into this game, the way we know it's played here. One governor told me, my brother, if we were in America, you would have been the best person. But you know, our politics is very different. It's not a politics of substance. It's not a politics of vision. It's not a politics of policy, substantive policy. It's a politics of all the things that don't matter. Ethnicity, religion, bribery, and money, most importantly. You have to have the cash. I went into politics briefly, and as I said that day, I'm totally out. I'm not a politician. I have resigned from politics in Nigeria. I've walked away.
What amazes people, including myself, is that, I mean, this is politics. Everybody is struggling. Doing everything humanly possible to get into. You went in there, you peeped, you probably took a few steps, and you said, this is not for me. What will make you come to that decision, you know, with clarity, like you always say?
The first law of success and greatness, know thyself.
Okay, so let's be a bit hypothetical. In this regard. Now, let's say you won at that time you did. At that time you contested, rather. Let's say you won. And you were made president.
Yes.
And this is being hypothetical now.
Yes.
How would you have been able to handle these same people that you ran away from?
Well, Thecla, I would say we should not dwell too much on hypotheticals. As I've said, I've left Nigerian politics. I'm not a politician. I've moved on. It was an experience. I gave it my all in that, and we made the impact we made, and it opened the door for a new type of wavelength in Nigerian politics, shall we say, a third force.
How would you respond to those who would say, perhaps you were weak or a coward for running away from that battle that would have defined you, probably strengthened you to be able to weather the storm, whether it's rain, sunshine, or Nigerian politicians?
You know, only a fool will allow himself to be trapped into suicide because of ego. Oh, they will say I'm weak. So I continue. I've gone to borrow money to pay my son's school fees because in the previous campaign I finished my savings. Oh, my wife has a problem or my relative I cannot pay. I'm going around begging. Jokers. How can I do that? I know myself. I started by telling you, I know myself. And so to thine own self be true. You know, that's what is called Dutch courage. When people drink a lot of beer and begin to think they are very brave and very strong, then you go and then the motorcycle just hit you on the road, and next thing you're in hospital. Look, the Bible says, better a living lamb than a dead lion. You know, wasn't that what the Bible said? You know, and there's the Fabian quote ascribed to Zeke: "He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day." There's no shame in saying, "This is not for me. Bye bye. I've gone." Oh my God. Nobody will fool me into making a suicidal whatever of myself. No way. No. Because I've faced those kinds of pressures because millions of people were inspired when I came out, and they were heartbroken when I decided to walk away. And it wasn't an easy decision for me. I understand that, but I have to explain to them. First, I have to survive. If I tell you something, look, do you know that I had to clean out my pension at some point in the 2019 campaign? Does anybody touch his pension? Oh, you tell me to come and run again. Go and bring $10 million and put on the table. Then we can start the conversation. Not when I have wiped away my pension and I now have to replace it. And you're telling me, oh, you're weak. Thank you, Mr. Strong. They're very practical things, and people don't understand these things because you don't go into telling all the stories. They are private to you. But I've just told you one. Who would know that I had to go and clean out my pension because the campaign was going. Politics is a money guzzler.
Where does the family come into this? How have you been able to manage this, your very, very active
life?
Life.
Yeah.
Career life. How are you able to balance it with family life?
Yeah. That's a very important question because, other than God, my family is the next most important thing to me. And it was also one of the reasons why I was able to have the strength to take the decisions to walk away, as we were discussing, from partisan politics, because I recognized that it had taken me away a lot from my family, and I didn't think it was worth it to spend the rest of my life, being a stranger to my family, yeah. So I wanted to go back to my family life, spend time with my wife and with my children, as I used to do. At least when I was a professor in the United States, it was a normal life. When I was in the central bank, I was very busy. I also didn't have a lot of time for the family. When I was in the UN, again, when I was in New York, in Croatia, in Tanzania especially, very intense work schedules. When I came to Geneva, to the World Health Organization and WHO, the Global Fund, the life in Europe was different. We worked hard. I traveled a lot. But every day I closed work at 6. In Arusha, in Tanzania, I closed work every day. And in the central bank, I closed work every day about 10 p.m. at night. I had 14-hour work days in the CBN for 5 years because of the banking sector reforms. So when I left the central bank, I had several offers in some of the global banks, but I didn't want a pressured life again. One of the reasons I took a professorship was because, one, I had always wanted to be a professor, but two, it would always give me some flexibility to spend quality time with my family. I would go and visit my kids in school, Parents' Day, all those things, and I loved it. I was so happy, So my family is very important to me. My wife, Mary Ann Onyechi, has been a big pillar of strength behind me, because somebody has to, I call her the chief operating officer, or I call her my minister of finance, you know, that sort of thing, because she helps me a lot to manage, you know, the home side of things. My children, I love them very much. You know, there are 5 of them. And my interest in life is to give them a good training, good upbringing, good legacy. Let them remember me when I'm gone and be proud of my memory. The way I remember my father, even though he's no more, and I feel very proud and satisfied that I am his son. He gave me, wherever I go, and I say who I am. Or sometimes people don't even need you to say. If it's in our communities, they will look at you and say, you are the son of so-and-so. Or just from the name, they will say, are you the son of so-and-so? Oh, that man. My father used to, when he was a civil servant, and he would beat his chest and say, 35 years as a civil servant, I never took a bribe. I don't forget it. It makes me know whose son I am. And so if I were to go to the central bank or to go to some public office and start messing around, people will say, hey, is this how Isaac Moghalu's son ended up? Just the Nigerian bug beat him. You know, that sort of thing. So the same way, I try to transfer those values to my children, you know, to know that vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I am content, and it comes from inside me. So I don't need to be the richest man in Nigeria to be happy. I don't need to be the president of Nigeria to be happy. I don't need to be, you know, I'm okay. Yeah, and I recognize, I mean, objectively speaking, that I have lived a life in which I have distinguished myself in many, many, many ways, in many different fields, you know, because God gave me that talent of being versatile, and I used it to the full. You know, so I've been a central banker, I've been a professor, I've been a United Nations diplomat, I've been a lawyer, I've been a journalist, I've also briefly been a politician, you know, very briefly, ever so briefly.
And you ran as fast as your leg could take you.
That's 440, as they say. Yeah, I ran 440 from the place, from that space, you know, but, you know, I feel fulfilled. And a lot of young people in this country have been inspired by me. And to me, that is just the happiest thing. You know, I can't go out onto the street in Nigeria and people will let you be. They will stopping you. Hi, is that Prof? Oh my God. The conversation will start. I enjoy it. I'll, you know, even though they're delaying me, but I have to respect them because they're human beings. And you give them hope, and you should not brush them aside, you know, because you're no longer, you don't need their votes anymore. You see what I'm saying? I enjoy those conversations. And I say to them, God will make another way for our country. Don't worry about me, I'm fine. Yeah, you know, yeah. So
what is that moment that has humbled you in life? One most humbling moment that you can remember?
I have had several humbling moments, quite frankly. One of which occurred a few days ago when I finished giving the leadership newspapers lecture, and there was a standing ovation. I wasn't expecting it. I expected people to clap. I mean, if you don't clap, that means you really don't like me, you know. But for people to clap warmly and then stand up and give you a standing, it means that what you were saying really sank in. It was a humbling moment. I've had several like that, you know, around the world and, you know, in different contexts, you know. There are also humbling moments that occur from, you know, tragic events, such as the recent death of Herbert Wigwe. You know, those kinds of things humble you because you realize that life is fleeting. And yeah, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. You know, whenever I remember that, I'm very humble. Nothing puffs my head up, nothing.
So let's talk about this, your new appointment. I mean,
is that the chairman of the Africa Private Sector Summit? Oh, that's a very important role.
Yes.
Yeah.
And let's talk about it as it affects us as a people.
Yes.
You know, and the value you'll be bringing to the table.
Yes.
I mean, since you're a Nigerian and you're there also as the
absolutely.
chairperson.
Yes. The Africa Private Sector Summit is a pan-continental non-profit organization that is private sector led. It's led by private sector, and the whole mandate of the APSS is to improve the enabling business environment in African countries so that trade and investment between our countries and inside our countries can move much more smoothly, and we can create wealth for Africa. You know, we support the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the ACFTA, which is a treaty that makes Africa a free trade area. So one of the things we're working on now is to get Africa's heads of states at the coming summit of the African Union in 2025 to adopt the Private Sector Bill of Rights that makes 24 specific provisions that will help private sector businesses inside African countries. We have such rights as, of course, the right to security and a stable environment to do business. So we want to move a lot more towards vocational training, skills, and all of that, so that can help industries create wealth. So this is what we are about, and we're mobilizing support across the whole continent for this Bill of Rights to be adopted next year, domesticated in our countries, and that becomes a very clear value that we have brought to the conversation, because we believe that if you sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and it's just a diplomatic treaty, but the private sector are not leading it, you're wasting your time.
If you get enough support, would you run again? Would you consider running for the #1 position in this country?
Thecla, I told you you're a dangerous woman, and you denied it. But, you know, I've told you that I have left politics, and I'm serious about it. I'm not God. I don't know tomorrow. But as far as a human being's decision is concerned, I have moved on from politics. I can tell you that.
Why would you say I'm dangerous?
Because you're asking me all these kinds of questions that lead Nigerians to say, this man, you're trying to bring my leg out into the street, as they say in where I come from. You know, but I've told you what I've told you.
And as they say where you come from, Mbano.
Mbano.
At least I said that one right.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
On a final note, I mean, you've talked about your dad,
Yeah.
I mean your father. You spoke glowingly about your father.
Yeah.
And I've seen you with
And my
the
mother,
likes of...
and my mother as well.
And your mother,
Yeah.
of course, your wife
And
is
my
also
wife,
there.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You know, and I've
Yeah.
seen you, you know, with Kofi Annan and a few others who are world leaders.
Yes.
And it begs the question of who are some of the other people that we don't know that have also inspired you to become who you are today?
Yes, that's a very good question. When I was young, growing up, there were people I admired. Today, many of them are my friends. Then I would never have known it. You know, people like Chinua Achebe is now late. I didn't get to know him personally, but Wole Soyinka, of course, later we came up to be friends, good friends. And in 2019, you will remember that he officially endorsed my candidacy to be president. And for a Nobel laureate to endorse and say that this is the person I think would have been, for me, it's a historical, significant thing. You know, Kofi Annan, great man, good friend, mentor, friend, you know, and we share so many stories together. I won't go into some of them. Including how he became Secretary General and all the politics in the UN. You know, we used to live in the same neighborhood in New York. We lived together on Roosevelt Island. When Kofi arrived in Croatia, he sent for me to become his special assistant. But my wife was pregnant with our first child. And in America, I couldn't afford a maid. It was just me and her. I had to make a choice, family or career. Everybody was telling me, Kofi asked you to be a special assistant. Leave! Tell your wife's mother to come and take care of her. You rush off to... I said, no. My spirit told me, stay with your wife. And I sent a message back to Kofi. My wife is pregnant. He didn't know. If he had known, he wouldn't have. Yeah.
Ask.
Yeah. So I said, my wife is pregnant. I'm torn, and I want to be with her when she delivers. Kofi sent a message back saying, Kingsley, good choice. If I had known, I wouldn't have asked. I respect your choice. I admired and respected people like Chief Emeka Anyaoku from Nigeria, who was Secretary General of the Commonwealth. And so these were the kinds of people who I liked, people who were professionally and intellectually distinguished. But let me tell you a funny story. When I was very young, I actually wanted to be a musician.
What?
Yes, I wanted to be a musician. Why? Just childish dreams. Because there was a musician called Tom Jones. Oh my God, this man was a crooner. He was handsome, he could sing, he could dance, and I loved Tom Jones. And I'm like, wow, I want to be like this man, you know. And of course, those are childish dreams. First of all, I found out I didn't have the voice to be a musician and all those kinds of things. But yeah, I briefly toyed with the idea.
Can you tell us something that we didn't know about you before? I mean, yes, you are in the public sphere, but I'm sure there are things that we don't know and would like to know. Give us an exclusive.
There's somebody I should have asked you to interview. But if you were to interview that person, he would tell you, he's a very good friend of mine. And we grew up a lot, you know, in university and all those days. The kind of jokes that we crack, or more specifically, I crack with him when we're together, he would laugh and say, he would say KBC, he calls me KBC, he would say, see you on this your serious face and all these your public lectures. See, nobody will know that you are this crazy, playful. you know. So I have some very playful sides of me that can be very, very mischievous, quite frankly. And but only my closest friends know those things. Yeah, just crazy things I would say, and everybody would just fall down laughing, you know. And so that's just a side of me that is not often expressed. Yes.
So what frightens you the most?
Nothing. I have no fear in my life. The Bible says I've not given you the spirit of fear.
You don't have any phobia?
Oh, yes. I have a fear of heights. That you know, in terms of, yes, okay, yes. I have a fear of heights. I don't like heights. Yeah, it gives me the creeps. I mean, I remember one time we were in the Central Bank and we were going to commission our new office in Lagos, and we had to climb the elevator, which had an exposed, you know, it was glass, but you could see, oh my God. I turned around and faced, everybody was laughing. You know, yeah, I have a fear of heights. Drives me, I don't like heights, makes me afraid. In that sense, yes. But if there's anything or anybody, no. Well, you know, so yes, yeah.
So looking at, are you planning on retiring even after this, or you still be as active as ever?
I will remain an active citizen, an active professional for as long as God gives me strength. You know, one of the things I thank God for is that I have a second address. Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm not desperate in the Nigerian context. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, so it makes some people feel that I'm too laid back. You know, you don't bother. Why should I bother? I mean, I have other things that are keeping me occupied and, you know, rewarded and fulfilled.
What's your favorite quote?
Wow, what's my favorite quote? When you ask me these kinds of questions, the quote then flies away. You know, that's my favorite quote. Wow. My favorite quote is actually, it's not a quote, you know, it's from the Bible. I have favorite, you know, passages. Yes, exactly. They're for me. But I enjoy reading, you know, philosophical quotes and all of that. So I have many people whose sayings inspire me. But yeah, so my favorite quotes come from the Bible. Yeah, absolutely.
Which would be?
Oh, well, one of them is Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, plans for good and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Yeah, I like that. It calms me down a lot.
Aren't you shouldn't you be considering becoming a pastor at this rate?
Well, you know, I'm not sure that's one of my callings, but
who knows?
Yeah.
Never say never.
Yeah, maybe it might become yet another career. No. Yeah.
I hope we did not harass you too much.
No, not at all. It was a very interesting conversation. You're occasionally mischievous, but yeah, that's fine. That's what I would expect of a journalist who knows her onions, you know, to provoke you from time to time. Yeah, yeah. So
As innocent as I am.
Madam Innocent. Okay, we'll change your name now. You know. So, but yes, it was a good conversation. Yeah. Conversations with history is we need that type of program in Nigeria because people need to listen to people tell the stories of their lives so that they're inspired, so that they learn, so that they can compare notes, you know. We are in the world today, especially in the world of technology, we are slaves to sound bites, the here and now. Oh, this just flashed across my phone, and then it's gone, and the next thing comes. But Conversations with History grounds us, you know, and it's a good program, and it helps us to learn. And so I'm honored that, you know, you chose me as one of your interviewees. And yeah, I've told my story as much as I could remember it. Thecla is a very good journalist, and I'm not saying it to flatter you. You know your stuff, clearly. Yeah, you're very dedicated to what you do, and you do your research, and you know, yeah, you're very good. And I like to work with people who are good at what they do, and who are passionate about it, committed to what they do. Yeah, so.
I say we want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you once more.
Thank you very much, Thecla.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That grip, what happened to the grip?
Oh, but I shook it. Yeah, did I not? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I want to say thank you so much for being part of Conversation with History. Until next time when we come your way with another guest, like I'd always say, be kind to one another and stay well.